being so open about mental health, has there become any moments where you start to recognize like, whoa, like now am I over-identifying with it? It's too forefront now again, instead of like, hey, that's something I struggle with. I'm gonna give it love and keep it in a place where I'm not shunning it, but also not keeping it as like, oh, this is my new identity.
Absolutely. Finding that balance is really, really important. I've very much shared the story of like the worst night of my life and being very close to taking my own life. And it does get to a point where you're ready to evolve that narrative, but you also recognize the value of that narrative. And so for me, like if I'm doing a speaking engagement, it's very interesting if I'm in bigger metropolises where people have had a lot of conversation about mental health. When I go, like I had a speaking gig in Mississippi recently, and even the word suicide, it was like the entire room tightened up in a way that's very different than if I'm in a different city. I'm always trying to read the room for where that narrative needs to be told. For me at this stage, I'm grateful that I've talked about it, but it's definitely not the main pillar.
You're listening to the Born Primitive Podcast. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Born Primitive Podcast. How we doing, Tone?
Morning, Bear.
Back from baby leave. You feeling good?
Baby 3.
Oh, my God.
The fact that we have 3 under 2.5, I'm feeling better than I thought I would, but certainly I would not say optimized.
I don't even want to know what your sleep score is these days.
Oh, dude, you don't want to see it. You don't want to see it. I was telling Mal, there isn't a second of the day where I don't know exactly what I'm going to be doing down to like the T. So,
and you don't do caffeine, so
yeah, no
like
caffeine.
We were just discussing. So you're a total maniac.
No caffeine.
Well, good to have you back, Tone. We're really excited about today's guest. I'm going to give her a quick intro, get right into it. But today we have Kendall Toole. She is a dynamic fitness instructor, mental health advocate, and lifestyle entrepreneur whose mission is to empower others. With a background in athletics, amateur boxing, acting, and a degree from USC's School of Cinematic Arts, Kendall transitioned from content production to becoming a top Peloton instructor. Her role at Peloton propelled her to fame, where her motivational energy and the never knocked out mindset have earned her a devoted following of over 1.3 million people. She has left Peloton and branched out to new adventures, starting the Wholeheartedly podcast. Beyond fitness, Kendall is passionate about destigmatizing mental health and promoting holistic wellness, inspiring her audience to embrace their inner strength and live healthier, more balanced lives. Kendall, hopefully that intro did you justice. Welcome to the Born Primitive Podcast.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I think you hit every note there. Well done.
Love it. Love it. Well, I don't want to skip too far ahead, but since we only have like an hour, I want to get right into kind of your rise to fame with Peloton and that journey there. So could you just unpack that and walk us through that part of your journey?
Totally. So at that point in my career, I was living in a makeshift basement. And I say makeshift because in Laurel Canyon in Los Angeles, they don't really have basements in California. So it was essentially like a converted cellar from like the 1960s. And a dear friend of mine who is a movie producer, go figure, was like, hey, I have space if you train me, because I'm trying to get in shape because I want to find a girlfriend and like find my wife, whatever. He's like, you can live in my basement. I've known this man since I was like 15. He's family. And I was like, great. That's super close to the boxing fitness studio that I work at on Sunset Boulevard. I had no money. So I lived in a little makeshift cellar, made it very nice. You can do a lot with a hot plate and a mini fridge. I can definitely cook on anything, which is great. And sure enough, after about a year and a half of being at a place called Rumble in Los Angeles, one of the instructors from Peloton slid into my DMs on Instagram, was like, hey, do you want to audition for Peloton? I'm like, well, I'm broke. I need money. And I also want to move to New York. So yes, let's try it and see. I lied a little bit. They asked if I'd ever taught cycling classes, and I had taken a couple. So I figured I should be able to teach them naturally. If I could take it, I could teach it. And long story short, about 3 weeks later, I was in New York auditioning, came back, got the call. And a week and a half later, I moved to New York City. And that was 5.5 years ago.
And at that time, how many followers did you have?
I had, let's keep it super transparent. I think I had about 10,000, but I think I bought, because you could buy followers then. I think I bought like 10,000 to try to make my brand, because it helps branding wise, especially in Los Angeles. When you're trying to like get private clients, especially for boxing training, things like that, I'm like, they need to think, it's LA. They get excited, like vanity stuff. So I was like, I need more numbers. So it was at that point, let's say authentically 10,000, perceptionally 20,000. And then I would say within, goodness, probably the next year and a half, I shot up to like 200, 300K.
I appreciate the honesty there, because that is becoming more like exposed, because I guess you can go look at people's follower history There's a guy on Instagram that does this to everyone, and then he like screenshots it in like 1 month. It'll go up like 100,000. You know what I mean? Did you just find, is this some shady software company that just, you cut them a check and then it's like overnight you just have 10,000 more? Is that how it works?
So early on, so this is what I learned. I actually worked at Snapchat early on in my career. That was my first job out of USC Film School, was producing all their global content and essentially being like a fly on the wall to everybody's snaps. So I've seen a lot. I've lived a lot of lives vicariously through other people. That's a whole story for another day that we don't need to get into too deep, because it's wow. But no, this website was just like a general kind of, I think they were trying to build it because they knew that it was early days of Instagram where people were recognizing the value of building a brand. It's much more difficult now. Also, Instagram and Meta have built things on the back end where they can identify that. So if you do buy followers, they will penalize you with lack of reach or things of that nature. So I'm proud to say, ever since the very beginning, I have never bought followers, but still there's a ton of bot accounts. There's a lot of weird stuff that goes on. So yeah, I mean, today it's probably pretty lucrative for people if they can buy followers, but it's not going to help their engagement overall. So it's kind of, not really worth it.
All right, so you get to Peloton. So walk us through how it works. I know it's all like, it was all remote, right? So you would record the workout, and then people from all over the world can obviously tune in and join the workout from everywhere. So like, what made you so different, and like kind of what led to the stardom?
That's a great question. I get uncomfortable in speaking about those things just because I'm like, oh gosh, kind of almost talking about myself in the third person. But I do know I'm good on camera. I grew up in the film industry. I grew up loving storytelling. And I think when I recognize the connection point between building a really strong fitness class, there's a narrative arc to it, right? Playlisting, there's a narrative arc to it. So if you can bring someone through a story within 20 minutes, 30 minutes, up to 60, and they're feeling good and they're working hard, because I work out intense. I'm a very aggressive person. So I have to get my aggression out somewhere. And I think in building that story and that narrative, it was really helpful because people could connect to it. And then later on, I'd say about a year into my time at Peloton, right about when COVID hit, I just felt like I had this platform and I had this reach to people. And to be honest, I looked like this like fake blonde California Barbie on the bike, and everybody kind of thought that's what I was. And I'm like, no, I have problems, guys. So I don't know, just I was on Instagram one day, and I was on Instagram Live, and I just started talking about like anxiety and depression and the fact that what I've been through and how I have a diagnosis of it and how I've tackled it. And that turned into a whole other beast, where then I recognized, okay, this is the value of having a platform, because I'm speaking about something that's actually relatable rather than just, getting a like and a follow and a "we love you" comment. It's wonderful, but I just don't find as much value in that.
Kendall, were you at a place personally where you were ready for that fame? Meaning, I see some people achieve fame and even have some friends who have a decent level of just general awareness, whether it's even social media or through athletics. And I've almost learned to feel pity for those individuals, because like on the surface, it looks, oh my God, look, they have the money now, they have the fame. But when you sit down with them, and especially if they're a self-reflective person, it completely rattles kind of the scaffolding you have and you identify by, because now all of a sudden you're in front of millions of people. Were you at a point when Peloton took off that you were ready to handle that? And of course, you already just said like, hey, I had things I've struggled and probably continue to struggle with. Or did it take, like, did that shove you into kind of a deeper hole where all of a sudden now you knew you had millions of eyes on you? So walk me through that kind of journey. And I'm sure opening up about it actually kind of had a settling effect to it. But were you able to do that right away, or was there some time at Peloton before you opened up?
That's a really, really great question. I think, to be honest, you never know what you're getting into. Like, you think you do, you think you understand it. Granted, I grew up in the film industry, so I was a failed kid actor, thank God, because I think if things did go right, my life would have gone in a very difficult direction, given what I already have going on for me mentally. So I'm grateful that didn't work out. But in my time at USC, I actually met a great mentor, incredible film director, really actually does a lot of like beautiful storytelling about just like more men's issues. He's very Americana. He did Lone Survivor. I worked with him on Deepwater Horizon. And so I met Pete in one of my film classes, and he recognized, I think I went up to him at the end of the class and I'm like, "You're so amazing. You started acting. You said, screw that. I want to tell stories. I want to build narratives and build, deeper bridges there." And he looked at me and he was like, how the fuck old are you? And I was like 20 at the time. And he's like, you need to go live your life. You need to go get your heart broken. You need to go travel the world. You need to get arrested. You have nothing to tell. You have nothing to talk about. And it kind of like threw me a little bit. And then that summer between junior and senior year at USC, I went to Italy, finished up my film and my language requirement there. I got robbed on the tram. The cops would never arrest me. I did make friends with the Cavalieri, but they were drinking at Campo Fiore with us. So I don't think I was going to get arrested, but I was like, okay, we're good there. That's not going to happen. But I really started to kind of live life. And then my mental health started to take a turn that senior year. But I was grateful for meeting Pete because he's the one that noticed my intense energy. And that's where boxing came into play because he had a gym on the west side of California in Santa Monica. And I started fighting. And I was petrified, but I was in a gym with a bunch of dudes and like a bunch of military guys. And I was the only chick. And I was like, okay, I can't back out. Sure, I'm going to wear the pink gloves because that's the only size that they have that will fit me. But I fell in love with that. And so I think, it's a bit of an extension from where we were going with feeling ready for it. But I had grown up in environments where I saw fame in different ways. And what was funny for me and still is now, I know how I don't want to be. Like, I know that I don't want to be that person that you meet when they say like, don't meet your heroes because you get so disappointed. I've had that. I've seen that so many different ways. It petrifies me to ever have that experience with somebody. So I think it's the pressure that I wasn't necessarily prepared for because you can't, because people with Peloton in particular, it's a parasocial relationship. So I'm with them every single day, telling stories about my family, about what our habits are, about like cool things while we're in these classes on the bike to motivate people, whatnot, really like sharing my story. And then I'll meet them in person or at an airport. Even now, this happened the other day. And they're like, how's your mom? Did you play that Cher song before you jump in the pool? And you recognize these people have a full relationship with you, but I don't know them. And so there's a weird kind of I don't want to say an emptiness, but there's kind of a guilt that comes with that, I think, that I wasn't always fully prepared for. But I do believe that in being vulnerable and honest about what I had been through, about my mental health journey, about how dark that chapter was my senior year of college, it became a great equalizer in a way where I felt okay to have the spotlight on me because I knew that it was serving some kind of a purpose. Otherwise, I think fame is very, very difficult. And I don't think it's necessarily something that humans are built to deal with and do well with.
How did you get there? Like, do you think if it wasn't so culturally relevant, meaning like 30 years ago, there was a stigma surrounding it. Now it's like, of course, it's still evolving, but people are more open about it. And you see it in the NFL, the NBA, like these huge platforms, people are talking about it. So was that something you had to like stew over for a while, or did you know like, no, this is something I'm just going to be open about, is like given the opportunity, or just where I'm at right now, I'm an open book regarding it?
Yeah, I feel that's a great question too. I got to a place where I hated the fact, let me put it this way. I had masked so much of my experience of what was going on with me deeper internally, especially my college years. Like nobody around me knew how bad it was. I could cover it. I was a cheerleader at SC. I was doing the film program. I was doing everything. I did everything to fake it. And then having this platform, I was then that girl again. I was masking myself for everybody to be like this kind of archetypical, like California bubbly chick on the bike. And I recognized, oh my God, I'm doing this again. And it just felt suffocating. And I don't know what really happened that day. I probably pissed off some people that I worked with because they're like, why is she talking about mental health and putting our public company on the line and saying these things? I guess I asked for forgiveness and not permission on that one, but I'm really grateful that I did because I think it was just a feeling like I needed to take the mask off and just, I hate feeling suffocated by an idea that I'm being something different or even allowing myself to be promoted as different than who I am.
And it sounds like that journey, I'm sure was even as now you probably reflect back and it's like, oh, this started as a child. But it seems like it came to like the true dark night was while you were in college. What tools have you, pun intended, what tools have you developed for kind of handling these things? And if you recognize those patterns re-arising or those stories kind of re-arising, because I think if you trace back a lot of these things, you realize you have an underlying story that probably developed when you were a child regarding your self-worth or something like that. And then what happens is you confirm that over and over and over through decades so that your reality starts to shape that, and your self-identity is either always looking for validation or always ways to confirm that reality you created when you were a child. How did you start to take a step back and get some space from that to where you're able to recognize like, whoa, like that's not going to go, if I continue in that direction, that's not going to end well. And how have you found that balance, and what do you continue to use to kind of, if nothing else, hold it in awareness so it's not overwhelming?
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. It does root back. I think it roots back to childhood of like, I was always a very high achieving kid. I had a lot of personal pressure on myself. I was a gymnast growing up. I would be brutal with myself if I couldn't get a particular move, and the way that we were trained too, even as young kids, you couldn't do something right, you had to do 40 pull-ups on the bar, in front of everybody. And there was like a little bit of humiliation there. Now, I don't think necessarily I think tough training is not a bad thing, but I think on a developing mind between that and growing up in the film industry where you're performing for acceptance and the validation comes, whether I understood it or not. I loved acting. I was a kid actor. I got very close on a lot of roles, but I got obviously a ton of no's. And I do think between the idea that in my mind as a child, logically, I understood that if I work hard, then good things are going to happen, right? And I can control that. I went into an industry at a young age that no matter how hard I worked or how good I was, there's other factors that come into play, whether there's an offer out or you look like the parent or all of these other things. So it was very difficult, I think, to conceptually understand that. And I think that created definitely some neural pathways in my brain that go towards, I need that validation hit. So what's really ironic is that now I'm in a space where it's still a part of my job. A huge part of what I do is on social media. That's a dopamine driver whenever a post does well or gets shared, or even if it's coming from a good place. So taking those breaks and being really honest with myself, I notice if I get, a little bit overwhelmed or if I get short and a little angsty, I'm like, there's something going on there. I notice weirdly, like I have a thing where I hated being barefoot as a kid because it rooted back to some like control habits. So if I start getting weird about being barefoot at all, or like the floors aren't clean enough, that's always like a big, like, we're starting to veer back into those more contained habits. But it's interesting because I deal with this on a day-to-day, and full transparency, there's highs and lows. Like when your job is, particularly in this in-between chapter between what I'm building and what I'll launch this summer, and between my chapter at Peloton, everyone's wondering what I'm doing next. I can't legally tell people quite what, and I have to continue to build my audience and feed that community. But that means I have to be on these validation-centered platforms that can do messed up things to my brain. So it's the training, it's the habits in the morning, it's the gratitude journal every morning, it's the breathing techniques, it's the moving my body, it's boxing. I will still, like, if I need to, I will hit a bag and go crazy, or really heavy music playlists. Like I was known for this at Peloton. I'm grateful, like they let me do it, but they're like metal or like really heavy hip hop or just really aggressive kind of energy allows me that space to get it out. So finding those outlets is so important.
Well, I think it's very cool that you're in a position that you could have continued that facade, right, with your huge following, and you could have rode that forever. And of course, the people that really knew you would know that wasn't all reality. But for you to show that vulnerability, for the everyday person that's putting you on a pedestal, which is what they're doing, right? They idolize you and they want to aspire to become you. For you to do that is, I think, so empowering for those everyday people that they can relate. Like, oh, she has the same problems as I do, and she has anxiety, and she has these other things. And I think that's so important. And I think it's pretty rare, on social media for people with your type of following to do that. So I commend you for that. And it's like, I wrestle with social media because there's some great things with it, but I would say it's 10% great, 90% terrible for all of us. Tony and I had a guest on who has studied human psychology for 20 plus years and immersed himself in different cultures. And he got his degree at the University of UNLV in Las Vegas. And there is a laboratory outside of Vegas that is it's a giant casino that has cameras and sensors everywhere. And all these different companies have bought into this casino to study the psychology of human behavior. And he taught us about, in his book, about the history of the slot machine and how it evolved and how casinos evolved. And the quick version is that they are playing into our psychological habits and tendencies to get us to behave a certain way. And all these different companies that are not even in the gambling industry are studying these behaviors of a bunch of lab rats walking around a fake casino gambling, right? And Instagram and all these other ones are designed literally with the same features. Even like how it's set up, you got stories at the top, left or right. You got up and down. It's like a wheel on a slot machine. You got little notifications. You got little sounds. Ooh, I got a DM. I wonder what that is. Ooh, this cute girl liked my photo. I wonder who she. You know what I mean? It's all these things, and it creates the dopamine rush and the. And as you're scrolling, I wonder what the next scroll is going to be. Oh, it's a funny meme. You know what I mean? And it's crazy when he deconstructed that. It like hit me in the face. I'm like, we're all getting played by this. And we don't even it was
Michael Easter is the guy.
Yeah, Michael Easter and Greg Olson, an NFL tight end. I was just listening to him on a podcast, and he was talking about Christian McCaffrey got married, and they made everyone, a running back for the 49ers, and they made everyone put their phones away before the ceremony, and they had to lock them in, and they're like, all right, for the next 3 hours, no one has a phone. He's got a bunch of grown adults who are all the best friends. It's like the people you haven't seen in a while and sitting at all the tables waiting. And he said, you could just see the angst of the group because it was a bunch of adults who did not know how to socialize, right? Because what do? You pull the phone out of your pocket. Oh, I got a little bing. Okay, no, I'll put it away. And you scroll it, whatever. And he was like, it was crazy because you could see it in amongst everyone there. And I just think, it's something that we have to figure out as a society because that's the 90% bad, right? And I think it's leading to more anxiety and mental health issues. And it's such a vulnerable thing because most of us get susceptible to it. I know I do. It sounds like you do. And even with your post, it's the affirmation of, oh, that one got shared a bunch and this and that. Same thing with our Born Primitive Instagram, right? If one rips, we're like, oh, cool. So it's like you almost tie worth to like literally an algorithm that is outside of your control. So I don't know. I wanted to bring that up, but I think what I wanted to highlight is you using your platform to kind of lower yourself down a notch and be human to a bunch of people who put you on a pedestal is incredibly powerful. And to me, that's the 10% that is like, okay, this is how this does some good. And of course, connecting with old friends and seeing people you grew up with have kids. And I enjoy that part because you can kind of stay in touch with them, but you don't still talk, but you see their life through, which of course sometimes
you're ambivalently supporting.
Yeah.
But even that, and I'm right there with you. And I think for me, there's even probably some deep rooted guilt that I have because my first job out of school was being at Snapchat. And we started the Snapchat story and then would curate all of the college campuses and all of like the branded content, all of the holiday content. And we'd watch everybody's snaps that they would submit to the company in a big queue. It was the craziest Big Brother kind of a first job out of college. Like you could not make it up. And what was interesting was there was a really kind of cool way that I could set up this college, like this couple on the Wisconsin campus. And I baited them. I made custom geo filters because I noticed they both had watched the story and were like, oh, you're cute. Oh, you're cute. And I'm like, I'm sitting, mind you, in Venice, California. It's like, let's see, 2 hours previous, maybe it's 7 at night. Some random chick they don't know who just graduated SC. And I was like, I wonder if I could get them to meet in person. How cool would it be if we could like incentivize them to meet? So we made geo filters that said help because we couldn't use their actual names, even though I could find out what their names were because that's the internet's scary. So I was like, help Vikings guy meet whatever girl or something, or yeah, because he was wearing a Vikings jersey. Sure enough, the entire campus started trying to say, found him here. He's going here. We got them to meet at a college bar, had the whole thing happen. And to this day, they don't know it was me, some random chick that they don't know. Because they were enticed because we incentivized the behavior that if people were using and interacting with the geo filter, they would make the story. Then we'd remove that and then we'd put up the stuff that we wanted. So I actively played puppeteer and like did like some weird like psychological operation on these sweet, lovely kids at a college campus, which was all well and good and meant in good fun. But when you recognize the power and the value of that, when you recognize that really everything on social media is just built for us to stay in the same hamster wheel. Like the explore page is a joke. The For You page is a joke. It's the algorithm telling you more of what they know you're going to click on. It's not you actually searching. So I think with where we're going in society and what I think is going to happen personally in the next 5 to 10 years is people are going to fight back a little bit. We're sick of being in that hamster wheel. And I think in-person community, paywalled communities or communities where there's not an algorithm determining what you see is going to be really, really important.
There's an adaptation happening. And I think you're actually like a poster child in a good way for that, of like, when you had mentioned it's weird to have thousands, millions of people who think that they have a relationship with you when you don't even know who the hell they are. It's like, that's a very new thing to humans. And to me, I remain optimistic. Even Bear knows, like, I'm somebody who uses no social media, but I remain optimistic because I look at this almost as like we're going through a software upgrade as a species, meaning like technology. What I remain optimistic about is the technology, meaning it connects us and provides access to resources and stuff that you just can't. It would have taken hundreds of years to do a different way. But in that condensed time, and it's really been the last 20 years, so much in the psychology of humans has changed where we have to get rooted back to something deeper than like the ego projections we're creating. Because if we get too attached to that, that's the shallowness that we're talking about. But there's something deeper. And even you said, like, instead of looking for love and validation on the outside, realize that you quite literally are love, like, meaning like that's always in you. So, but where the social media comes in, and I like that you said there's going to be pushback. I agree. I think we're starting to remember, like, wait a second, no, we're not these silly projections we're creating online. Like, there's something deeper to us than that. But that takes some delayering. It's not just something you can all of a sudden be like, oh, okay, I realize that now. It's like you kind of have to go through. And my next question would be baked into this is like, you said you love creating narrative arcs within your Peloton classes. Where do you feel like you're at where in your narrative arc of life are you at right now? It sounds like you kind of went through a dark night. Do you feel like has that kind of ebbed and flowed? And instead of over asking the question, I'll just leave it there. Like, where do you feel like you're at on your arc right now?
Yeah, it's a really great one because I had an opportunity. I had a publishing company reach out and say, hey, like, we know your mental health journey has inspired so many people. Like, I'm very open. I've talked about it very publicly. Like, do you want to write a book? And I was like, they approached me last year and I was like, okay, I just turned 30. I've lived a lot of life. I mean, I could fill that book growing up in Los Angeles alone, going to USC alone. There's a lot. I have a lot of chapters, but I kept thinking about it and I was like, it's just not time. And I'm really grateful because, full transparency, I thought I was going to be staying at Peloton at least another year. And then we got into beginning of this January contract renegotiations and what their ethos was for where they wanted to go, the containment and control that they had over where I could be with brands, deals, speaking, all of that. And it just was like, I think I've ran my course here. I don't think I can grow here any more than what I need. So it became the decision of, I'm going to move forward. And to be honest, this year, the last 6 months, and then the next 6 months until the thing I'm building launches, it's another like kind of a dark night. It's that in-between period when you're figuring out, okay, what do I want to bring with me and what is no longer serving, and being really, really honest about, even in myself, like, what habits that I've had in the past do I need to let go of? And having that future cast of, for me, it's really about community. It's about still serving people in the mental health space. It's still about in the physical space. But how do we have deeper conversations? How do we encourage real healthy habits? How do we kind of like deprogram ourselves? And I think that's a big part of what I know I've was able to touch on within the Peloton community and the community that still stays with me. They're like, we just miss you. We miss these like real conversations and the feeling that I felt so empowered going into class and coming out of it. And I'm like, okay, how do we build that again? So I would say at this point, it's a hell of a gray area right now. And it's a good challenge because there's days when I'm like, oh yeah, everything's super clear. I know what's going to happen. And then even this week, there was 2 little business decisions I was going to make. And I was like, absolutely not. I thought that was a yes. Hell no. We're canceling. We're pivoting. We're going to go another direction. So it's a process of, I would say a lot of people are like, oh, becoming who you are. And you need to like keep layering yourself. And I think it's the opposite. I think the more you get in line with who you are, the more you remove layers. And that it's kind of deprogramming, and the vulnerability is actually really powerful. So at this point, mental health wise, like business wise, all of it, it's good, highs and lows, but I'm in a building phase. Like, I just feel like it's very foundational right now. And so I'm making sure I'm setting the table with the right people, with the right partners, with the right viewpoint, and keeping the main thing. So it's kind of like I'm in my like training moment. Like, it feels like boot camp a little bit right now, which I do like. So
being so open about mental health things, have you, and I think you'll know that I'm not, I hope this doesn't come across as insensitive. I think you'll understand the premise of the question is, as you've become so open about it, and even here, like, and I appreciate it so much, and so does Bear, like you're talking about it in such a self-aware way, but has there become any moments where you start to recognize like, whoa, like now am I over identifying with it, and it's too forefront now again, instead of like, hey, that's something I struggle with, that's something I wrestle with, I'm going to give it love and keep it in a place where I'm not shunning it, but also not keeping it as like, oh, this is my new identity. Have you ever asked that question of like, oh, whoa, like, of course it's so nice to open up about this, but is it now becoming too much a part of my identity?
Yeah, absolutely. Finding that balance is really, really important. And I think, especially when you start to talk about a story, like, I was talking about, I very much shared the story of like the worst night of my life, and being very close to taking my own life and those moments. And it does get to a point where you're ready to evolve that narrative, but you also recognize the value of that narrative. And so for me, like if I'm doing a speaking engagement, it's very interesting if I'm in New York or LA or bigger metropolises where people have had a lot of conversation about mental health. But then when I go to the middle of America, or when I go, like I had a speaking gig in Mississippi recently, and even the word, the word suicide, it was like the entire room tightened up in a way that's very different than if I'm in a different city. So I would say I'm always trying to read the room for where that narrative needs to be told, and what's the value there. I think for me personally with this story, it's a huge chapter of who I am. That night was 10 years ago. This last month, I had like the anniversary of that night a couple weeks ago, which was very like mind-boggling and incredulous. But it's nice to know that it can be evolved in a different way. Because I've shared that, now we can go to the next level of, okay, we deal with it, we talk about it, I have it, everyone's gone through something or knows somebody who has. Now it's like, now what do we do with it? Like, how do we deal with that in the day-to-day? And then that's where, for me, I get excited, like as a coach and as somebody who wants to empower, it's through the habits, it's through what I'm building. How can I build something that will help, where we can talk about it, but it's not our identity? Because it is. I think it's gotten trendy too, which can be difficult. And I'm grateful on one hand that people are talking about it, but then sometimes I'm like, shut up, that's not anxiety. That's just you, like, you're stressed, bro. It's okay. Like, it happens. Like, it's not everything is a massive mental health moment. So it's the double-edged sword of awareness and of people finally talking about it. But I do believe the pendulum kind of settles. So for me at this stage, I'm grateful that I've talked about it, but it's a piece, but it's definitely not the main pillar.
But I think your message, and I like the word empowering, although that has been overdone at times too. Like, I like what you said, and that's why I actually asked you the question about like where are you at in the arc of your narrative right now, is because that like the Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey, like I have hope and optimism that people start to view even mental illness a little differently, in the sense of like, hey, these, don't look at it as a monster. Like, look at it as usually parts of yourself you've neglected, and start to actually integrate and then transcend, instead of, oh, I'm going to shove this in a dark corner and then pretend like it's not there anymore. But part of it, and that's why I bring up like the Joseph Campbell thing, is that like, not only do movies have that, like you said, you did it in your Peloton class, like there's an arc to it. That's what's special about being a human, is that arc, and to sink into those dark moments. And it doesn't mean it makes it easier, but if you can maintain an awareness of like, hey, this fucking sucks right now, but like there's going to be light that comes out of this, like it sets you up to be able to cycle through those much quicker, which I actually think is an innate part of being a human. And if you get too identified with the darkness, or you try to seclude it too much, then you're just going to stay in that way too long, where it's like, hey, recognize it, integrate it, and then you'll turn those cycles quicker, which are those arcs kind of happening. And if we all reflect on our life, I would say if you're an integrated human, you're seeing that like, whoa, there are these ebbs of flows of like, everything great, I'm taking off, and then darkness as far as like, depression for a couple years. So yeah, love to hear that you I feel like you have a good awareness of that, and you're finding that middle ground of like, okay, not over identifying, but also not just neglecting and shoving it in a dark corner, because I think these things are innate, the same way happiness and joy, like, yes, we want to feel more of those. Like, you only feel that with knowing the texture of depression and sadness. Like, you can't without that polarity, neither mean anything. So it shouldn't be viewed as bad. It should just be viewed as like, hey, this is a different season, and what are the tools I have to get me through this season?
That's so funny. That was about the word I was just about to bring up. You like totally pulled it from my brain. It is. There's a seasonality to everything. And we have, and it's funny, as human beings, we know this, but we forget because of this social media tool that we have, where we see the highlight reel. We see everyone in summer or in spring where everything's going great, and they're only going to show that. It's very interesting navigating that because, I mean, look, the earth has seasons of plant, like the leaves fall, you got winter. We were in like 6 feet of snow in 2 days. I had to shovel my first driveway. That was wild. It was fun, but damn.
Good workout.
It is a good workout. I was like, oh my God, my core, I need to do this more. Maybe not move to the snow, but visit a couple of times a year would be really good. But it is like, there's a seasonality to life. And there's always that before that next big season, it's kind of like an arrow, like you get pulled back, and it's all that frenetic, kinetic energy that's building up so that you do have the momentum to move forward. So if ever I talk about, especially when I talk about mental health, I think it really is just about meeting it. Like it's just meeting everything as it is. So that's the power of vulnerability. I think once you're vulnerable, it becomes, you recognize the power that it doesn't have over you because it's not a monster anymore. It's something you're actively talking about and discussing. It's also too, just, it's walking through that. And that's where training and being able to have some habits in your life and in yourself, you have to have that consistent discomfort so that when discomfort comes, because it will, it's absolutely inevitable, you are not completely frozen by the experience. Like you're like, okay, I lift heavy in the gym, or I know that not every day that I do something, it's going to be a win. In fact, it's probably going to be a third of the time. A third of the time you're going to be doing great. A third of the time you're going to be absolutely neutral. No thoughts, just kind of blah. And then the other third, you suck. And that's, a lot of people think you're supposed to be winning at least 2/3 of the time. And it's like, it's not how it goes. It's not how it goes.
Yeah, I think that's why it's particularly important, because you don't know when those moments are coming, is to get ahead and prepare yourself to be more resilient in those moments. So that's why, like, your physical fitness is important, your financial health, these other things, you just how squared away you are in your day-to-day life. Because imagine if you get a major kind of mental health thing coming, but then, your finances aren't in order and you don't ever work out and you eat like shit. Then those things become, the problem compounds even more. So I think that's something we all need to make sure we do is conduct ourselves in a way where we are prepared as best we can for those moments, because it's coming for all of us, right? And it's going to come in waves. And you could just imagine how people that are a bit more compromised in other areas of their life, like imagine if you have creditors calling you because you can't pay your credit card bill and your wages are getting garnished, and you have high blood pressure, so you're just tired all the time because you don't know how to eat with balanced diet. You're getting shitty sleep, and then this big thing comes and hits, and you imagine that person dealing with it versus somebody like you that is probably a bit more squared away. And it's like, all right, this is still hard, but at least the other systems are in place to allow me to fight through this. So I just think that whole kind of, and I think you call it a 360-degree wellness. Maybe I'm alluding to that a little bit. I'm sure there's way more that goes into that, but I think that's why it's important to have your shit in order for those when those things come up.
Yeah, and it is. It's not sexy either. Like having systems in place is not a fun thing to do. That's, I'm in the middle of it right now, like building all, working and having all these calls and figuring out how we're going to build a structure that's going to sustain and what makes sense and what doesn't. It's not necessarily fun. Like also building a budget for yourself is not fun, because it's also like, damn, I spent how much on, it's very confronting when you realize like subscription services.
Did you do that?
DoorDash?
What DoorDash, was that your Achilles heel?
Well, living in New York, particularly because again, the Californian in me is like, it's cold. I don't feel like going out. And granted, I wanted a Bronco so bad. So I got a Bronco and I love that damn car. But then I was like, oh, it's cold. I don't want to take it. And then there's potholes on it. Like I found every excuse. I just want to be cozy. So I was like, whatever, I'll just get DoorDash. But I would deliver groceries, which is even worse because the upcharge on that is higher. But then I would do that because then I was like, at least I'm cooking for myself because I love to cook. But then it's just, yeah. So the DoorDash got me. What you got to check. There's a lot of apps you're paying for that you don't realize that you're paying for. And it's not fun when you look at it, because then you have to kind of confront yourself and feel stupid for a second. You're like, wait, I spent what on that? Like that's a first world problem. But it is, getting those structures in place is essential. And then what also has to happen is giving yourself some type of a grace when the structures can sometimes veer off, because it does. I mean, hearing from you, 3 under 2?
3 under 2.5.
God bless. Twins?
I know. No, well, okay.
Irish
So
twin?
she's 2 years, 7 months. So a little over 2.5, and then 14 months, and then newborn. So they've been back to back to back. So it is, it is. Yeah.
That's murderous.
But
I mean,
that's it. But there's a freedom in you guys. I mean, we're talking about it right now is like, and I call it state maintenance. Brian Johnson has his own model for this of like, okay, what are the pillars of like, in most people, I think most wise people, I would say it's like, okay, sleep, relationships, movement, and then some form of like, I would call it, whether this could be like your psychological health or spiritual health. Like those are kind of like, if those pillars are in order, typically you feel somewhat of a groundedness and flow throughout your day. And what I will say about kids is that they are unbelievable for keeping you in those pillars. Now, what I would say also is like, I'll actually compliment like myself a little, is that like, if you've done the work, they shove you into those pillars. If you haven't done the work, I could see how that chaos is almost overwhelming. But if you're focused and you know what your priorities are, kids triple that focus instantly. And as you have more, it does it even more, where I think you heard like there isn't a second of your day that's unaccounted for. And that there are times that feels constrictive. Like I haven't worked out in a month. That's the first time since I've probably been 9 years old that hasn't happened.
You haven't worked out in a month?
You can't know.
Oh, that's crazy for you.
Yeah, I know. But it's actually been it's kind of like an exercise of grace to say like, hey man, you're waking up at 5:45 with the kids. You're getting them to like, you're packing all their lunches while of course Elise is with the newborn. It's like, there really isn't a time, unless you're going to do it during work, that you could do this, because you're picking up the kids then, and then 3 in the evening. But what I was getting to is there is actually a freedom to it. And there's a freedom to kind of letting yourself dissolve a little bit. Now, of course, putting it on the shelf and saying like, because if you let it dissolve too far, you see that too. Moms, dads who have completely lost, they completely lose their self of identity. But for me, who's such like a go-getter, it's actually been a really like good exercise to say, hey, let that dissolve a little bit, and then know what you're going to get back to, have a plan to get back to it. But for these next couple of months, like just really be there in support for Elise and the kids. And it's been really cool to see that. And yeah, to pull it back to the thread we were saying, the focus it creates on those priorities and the sacrificing of yourself. Although I would say don't do that all the time. There is that ego projection we talked about. Like it starts to break that down, because you realize like even me as like a naturally thinner guy, you're like, oh my God, I've lost 3 pounds in the last 3 weeks because I haven't been able to lift. Like,
I need creatine and muscle. What do I do?
You hear those thoughts come up, and yeah, it's almost a meditation to kind of sit with those. So yeah, as chaotic as it is, chaos, once you've built, and it's as you said, like viewing these struggles as an opportunity switches the whole thing to all of a sudden it's like building a muscle. You look at chaos and you kind of smile and you're like, all right, like we're going to do this and we're going to work through it. But we as a culture, and Barry, you and I have talked about this a ton, we shy away from it too much. And like, it's actually because like that's an innate part of being a human. Thousands of years ago, your day was fucking hard.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, they danced and sang, and I think they felt more connected. We've lost that connection a little bit because we're kind of just like trying to sand out all the edges and have everything be okay. And it's like, no, that's actually, I think humans want to experience that kind of roller coaster,
especially with all the conveniences, man. It's
I mean.
Great. Like, the DoorDash is great. I love it. I'll do some DoorDash. But
like I think we are built for conflict, which is really funny, because I think a lot of how society is now, and what you're speaking to is so true. Nobody wants to, a lot of people walk around thinking they're not going to be offended or being upset when they are. And I'm like, sweetheart, like if you walk around the world and expect not to be offended, you're not living. Like things are going to be confronting. That's the whole point of like traveling and going to other cultures and experiencing other people and respecting that they have a different way of doing things. It's interesting though, because I think a symptom of wanting to control being offended and standing on all the edges is that we have an excess of energy. Because what do we do with that now? Like, where do we place it? And I think then it goes internal and we can pull ourselves apart at the seams mentally and physically, because we need conflict. That's just, I think, a deep part of the human condition is being able to face and overcome. So that's why I think the gym and working out or doing anything physical is such an easy first step for people, because it's in a controlled, contained environment where you're not thinking about it per se, but you're overcoming barriers, whether it's lifting a heavier weight or running a further distance. But you need conflict to feel some form of satisfaction. And that's the same thing with growth. Like your muscles don't grow until you break them. Technically, that's what's happening. They're breaking down a little bit and rebuilding. So the same thing has to happen on, I think, a more of like a soul or person level, that you have to be slightly broken in places to continue to evolve. And it's the only way to do it.
Yeah, and you build an understand like going through hard shit, and I don't mean like physical, I mean like mental, life, finance, like relationship. You start to build a backbone that actually allows you to relate to people, because like then, like you said, when you actually know who you are, no word, like you would never get offended by words, because you're like, yeah, you're not gonna. I know who I am. Like you could say whatever you want to me, like, and that doesn't mean if who you think you are hasn't been reaffirmed by your friends and family, I would say maybe check that a little bit, because you might be delusional. But if you truly know who you are and that's been validated by like your loved ones and friends to say like, hey, yeah, you like that is who you think you are is who you are, like then no one could ever. And that's what drives me crazy about like the political landscape is like you would never get offended by somebody's beliefs. You understand like, hey, they're a little different, and that's okay. Like that doesn't change who I am, and we're still humans. We can still relate, but. Alex Hormozy said a quote once. He's like, confidence isn't standing in the mirror and shouting affirmations at yourself. Confidence is looking in the mirror and realizing you are who you say you are. Like that. And it's like, unpack that one for a while. Like yeah. I love that, because I think it relates to like so many of us have these projections that actually all this insecurity, these like you said, getting pissed off at people, being sensitive, is actually just a result of us not understanding and knowing on a deep level who we actually are.
Yeah. Or sitting with the fact, it's like, where is that coming from?
Yeah.
Because it does. It takes a lot of courage to sit with yourself and say, damn, I'm off in this. This is an area where I need to spend some time and some energy and work through some things, because it's affecting the way that I'm perceiving myself, which is really what it comes back to. Like whenever we have shame or guilt or anything like that, it's because there's some internal sense that we're letting down, or that we feel we're not living up to. So instead of being upset and running from the shame and the guilt of it, it's like, okay, where is that coming from? Where are spaces that can help? But that's why it's so important, like what we were saying about social media, when, what you're around shapes your perception. So if you're spending a lot of time in the digital world, if you're spending a lot of time on social media, it is going to shape how you feel people think about you, or your own self-image. And this happened to me too. Like the vitriol, that everything that happened with politics, especially over the last year, was a really hard position to be on social media, because everybody wanted me personally to like take a stance on either side. And I'm like, listen, I'm not going to go there, because no matter what I do, there's not going to be cognitive discourse. Like there's no way to have a nuanced, thoughtful, compassionate human conversation about this. All that's going to happen is someone's going to be, because all they wanted was for me to confirm their beliefs out of my mouth. Mm-hmm. That's all they wanted. They didn't want my opinion. They wanted their opinion to come out of my mouth. And it's an interesting space. And I learned a lot, because it was very difficult. I tried to post something that was very just like, remember we're neighbors, remember we're positive. That backfired so bad. Oh my God. I was with my family in California, and we were going out to Joshua Tree for a little break for the election. Just like, I was like, whatever happens, let's just be in a beautiful space and enjoy our time in the desert, whatever. So that was great. But God, I was like, I can't say anything. And it was really sad to me, because I was like, hold on. If it's a message of like, we're all going to drive down the street and go to the same grocery store, like whether you voted the same as somebody or not, you have to live with them. You have to coexist with people that don't agree with you on things. And that's okay. And that's part of being human. We have to be humans first. And it was very interesting in that experience, but I did learn a lot, and it was confronting, because I was like, oh, wow, like I need space away from this, and I'm going to take some time, or I'm going to put less value in this, even though a lot of my business and my community, I reach them through these platforms. Then it really confirmed for me, okay, I need to have a platform where I'm not controlled, or we're not controlled or contained by an algorithm, where I know the people that want to hear my voice and I want to hear their voice, and we want rich communication. We're in a space where we can do that. And that's what's starting to shift with social media. And I think people are waking up to that. And it's going to be very, very interesting how that turns in the next couple of years, especially with AI.
Oh yeah. I was just thinking that AI, crazy, man. Crazy when you can have a machine controlling the narrative of information, right? Just a few tweaks on the back end and you just rewrote history. Because, our kids, when Ren is writing her first college paper and she's 18, she's going to say, AI, tell me about the Roman Empire. And it's going to say, yada, 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 yada. And she's going to say, oh, that's the Roman Empire. That's the first introduction to that topic she's ever going to get, right? Well, you can change, like there's tech companies that can literally change what it spits out, right? We already seeing this with Google, right? If you do a Google search, it's literally removing articles, like, you know what I mean? And to me, that's terrifying. That's a whole nother topic. But man, you know, it's like the textbooks aren't going to exist when our kids are in college, and then whoever's pulling the strings on the back. I mean, you talk about propaganda. That becomes the easiest way to propagandize an entire society or entire generation, because they won't know any better. Oh, that's what happened during the Civil War. Okay, that's the new history we just created overnight because of a Microsoft saying, "Oh no, this is the new narrative." So it's pretty scary, but it's evolving, and it's going to happen at warp speed with AI. I mean, you're already seeing it, but I have one more question on my end. I want to, because you alluded to some things, and I know you can't say everything. But looking out 5 to 10 years, where does Kendall want to be? What are the goals? And don't be bashful. I want to know what the real goals are. Yeah.
That's what's good at this stage. It's like, I'm a big fan of speaking to it, because there's nothing better than like going back. If I say it on the podcast now, and then 5 to 10 years from now, they're like, oh, she manifested that. Like, yeah, but it's true. It's what you're building and going towards. I really would love to be some type of a massive stakeholder at the forefront of a health and wellness consciousness shift. And so what that would look like for me is building a very large community in mental health and wellness that's able to build new habits, and community that's not contained by someone else's perception of what that is. I would say there's a company I'm really excited that we're just on the formation stage of building, but it's a CPG food company. So it's a particular ingredient. So really trying to take salad dressings and change what is available to them on shelves, how they're not filled with anything nutrient dense. And it really angers me, because I get mad when I see my dad try to make a salad, and I'm like, what the hell is that? Get the burger. Like, Thousand Island from a particular brand, that is disgusting.
32 ingredients in it.
32 ingredients, xylitol, guar gum, all these other things, oils that you don't know where they come from. And I'm like, where's the protein? Like, where's the nutrient density? So I'd love to also be a significant part about, helping America kind of wake up when it comes to what's in their food, and to helping have better choices there. So really standing on health and wellness, building businesses that impact millions, and hopefully empower millions to make choices that are best for them. And then that's my whole goal. If people can feel empowered in their own person, I think they make kind, ethical, proper, just human decisions that care about other people. And that's what we need to get back to.
It's happening. I think it's a good time. I remain extremely optimistic that, and I've seen it, and Bear knows I'm a nerd with that type, the kind of health and wellness, even water, the foods, like there's a appetite for it that 8 years ago I'd never talked about it, because I was like, no one else is talking about it. I would just read book after book on it.
Yeah.
And
of course, you're like, I'm going to be called like a hippie if I say it, which
exactly.
is so funny, because it's just like it's going back to basics.
I know.
Like, more people are gardening than ever. I can't wait. The house in Florida, definitely going to get like herb garden, all of the above, because I love cooking, love having all that just available, and just learning about it. Like, you learn how we farm in America in some places, and it's eye-opening. And then what's going on for the nutrient density or lack thereof. And then meanwhile, like a big one for me, when I lived in Italy that summer, I thought that I had food intolerances and like celiac, because I was having all these issues. My hair was falling out like freshman and sophomore year of college, all of this. And then I go to learn, I was like, oh, I had pasta, pizza, everything every day. And I lost weight in Italy. And I was like, wait a second. So that's where the seed was planted in my head about, wait, why are the food systems different? Why are the the regulations different? Obviously we see it going on. The food babe, who I love, she's going after Kellogg's hardcore right now. Bless her
and that's
heart.
Regardless of the election. Like I and Bear knows, I'm also not. But RFK, I will say, I've been outspoken. Like, I love the fact that, and of course he has his history, and we all do. But like, the fact that RFK has been the first politician to just be straight calling out these different because that, I truly believe, Kendall and Bear has heard me rant about this. I always use a mental exercise of like, when I'm 90, what do I think we're going to be looking back on at our generation and saying, how the fuck did they like allow that? And I think a huge one, we will look back at our food supply and be like, what were they doing? They were putting this in their bodies, and then weren't willing to relate this to why cancer rates and all these things are spiking through the roof. It's like, that blows my mind. And I think finally, there is an individual, and I won't overstate, who knows the changes he's actually able to make. I'm optimistic, but for somebody even just to call it out, I'm like, finally, the elephant in the room people are pointing to at a mass scale. And that needs to happen, because the corporate capture that exists in this country right now it'll make you vomit as you pull back the layers on it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And I think this is not a partisan issue. Like, it's
No,
the health.
our kids are not a partisan issue.
No, that's exactly it. Like, as you want your kids to grow up healthy, you don't want to have to be at a cancer center when they're 20 or 30, which is happening at a crazy rate right now. Even hearing about my friends, I'm like, wait, what? You had abnormal cells? What is going on? And truly, we need to look at this as Americans. Like, we've had our food system completely change. Fast food is terrible. We have the highest rate of heart disease of any nation in the world. Like, we are ill in this country, and we need to fix it. And I do believe nutrient density really does support also better mental health. Having enough protein in your diet is very, very important. So I could rant on this for days. That's maybe another podcast episode. Let's see what I do with this company that we're starting, and I'll come on back and we can chat. But
yeah, we'll do another one with that.
Well, my last thought on this is, like, it's insane that an Oreo that is sold in the United States is different than one you can get in Canada, right? Like, it's like, how did they get away with it? And you know how,
Lobbyists.
because it's the lobbyists. And the guys left the tobacco industry when that got under scrutiny, and it got all the new regulations and the taxes and the warning labels and all this. But for a while, we're just in where tobacco was. Was that in the 90s, 80s?
No,
Whenever?
it was 70s.
70s,
It started,
okay.
And then they said, hey, make food as addicting as
all
possible.
these tobacco guys, they know the playbook, and they said, well, we're getting the hell out of here. We're going to go to food. We're going to change the ingredients so we get everyone addicted, just like Instagram does with us scrolling a damn news feed. We're going to pay off all the politicians, and everywhere in the world, they're going to be smart and make us, put the right ingredients. But in the United States, those idiots, we're going to throw all this crap in there. So we talked about the roll of Oreos. You never eaten one Oreo in your life. You're eating a whole sleeve, right? You ever eaten one Oreo?
No.
You ever had one potato chip, Tony? Ever? You ever eat a Lay's and you say, I'm good, I had one? No, you eat 50 because they're so damn good. It's because they've made it that way. And you even talked about autism, right? It used to be 1 in 2,000. Now it's 1 in 35 in the state of California. How crazy is that? This is the fucking war we need to fight. People like us, we nerd out on it, so we're savvy enough to know in the grocery store what to get, but the average American has no clue. They have no clue.
And it also shouldn't be cost prohibitive. Like,
Yeah.
Why is it that if someone's going to go on or needs government assistance for food, why is it that the produce and the things that honestly have such high turnover anyway, why is that not a part of the program? Why are we promoting that those individuals have to get the potato chips and that's what the food stamps will go towards? That's a problem. That's a massive issue. If people, it's an old school perception with grocery stores, but they usually say, try to shop around the outside because that's where the refrigerated stuff is. Not true for everyone. I love a Wegmans. It's not true there, but still, it's like, it's really eye-opening when you're like, why are we encouraging poor decision-making? Why do we want sickness? Now, if it's people can go, is it something deep and nefarious, or is it just that it's profitable? I will always say at the end of the day, follow the money. If it's profitable for them, they're going to keep doing it. I think that's more of where it probably came from. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure that there's not Americans in food deserts. Like, having access to Wi-Fi so that we can connect to the world is as much of a right as being able to have access to food that's actually nutrient dense and good for you. Yeah. And if all the other countries in Europe have seemed to figure it out and don't allow it, why are we allowing ourselves to be, honestly, it's like setting a boundary and then disrespecting it. We need to have better boundaries with what we allow in our food system.
Let's close on that.
That's a good way to end it. Hey, if you ever, Tony, I'm sure would love to have you back on to talk all about this and our farm system and all this. But hey, thank you so much. I know you got to catch a flight. It was an absolute pleasure talking with you, and we'll wish you the best in the new endeavor that you can't allude to, but we'll absolutely be following it.
I'll let you guys know soon. It'll be up your alley.
If once that's up and running, you want to come back, and obviously we can plug in and dive into that new endeavor. We'd love to have you. But thanks so much, and you got an ally here at Born Primitive, so hit us up if we can ever do something for you.
Oh, amazing. Same. The feeling is so mutual. Thank you both so much. Try to get some sleep, Tony. Good luck.
I will. Thank
And
you.
hit the damn
don't
gym.
go
I
out
know.
with
Get your
Oreos.
ass in the
I know,
gym,
I
Tone.
know.
Maybe just like a 20-minute lift, just
I know,
something.
I
You know,
know.
carry both babies in both arms, and it's like a farmer.
I do keep a 60-pound kettlebell in a room where I'll just get some swings in. So I'm being
Okay.
a little
that's good.
disingenuous. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, a
Yep.
little overhead, you know,
Yep.
little marches, good
Exactly.
for the core, help with the
Exactly.
lifting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
All
Thanks,
right,
you guys.
Kendall. Take care.
Thanks, Kendall.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.